Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your participation and engagement this evening. As people continue to join the meeting, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. All right. Well, my name is Dana Savanek. I'm here tonight supporting the City of Dublin with facilitation of this webinar. I am going to be sharing a few logistical items with you all just to ensure that everyone can participate in the workshop. So for starters, we want to remind everyone that we are recording the workshop so that we can share it with those who are not able to attend tonight. If you are in need of language translation services, you can open the closed caption uh, icon at the bottom of the Zoom window bar, and you can select which language you'd like translations or just closed captions in general. If you don't see that icon at the bottom of your screen, you can go into the More button and you can select it there. Additionally, we are going to be utilizing public participation with the Q&A function. So if you have questions that you would like to submit, please do so through the Q&A box, and our team will be organizing those questions and responding to them during the question and answer segment of the webinar later on in the program. Just as a note, we are not using the chat box, and panelists are the only ones that will have their cameras on and their microphones on. The webinar will end at 8 o'clock, and for any questions that we don't have time to get to, we will be responding to those and posting answers to those on the website, as well as the recording of this meeting will be available on the website also. And if you have any questions, you can also follow up via email, which we have at the bottom of the screen here throughout the program, and we'll have loaded at the end of the presentation as well. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to City of Dublin Public Works Director, Debbie Tribby, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I'd like to start with some introductions so that you can get to know those of us on the panel here tonight. So my name is Debbie Bell. I am the city's Public Works Director. We're here with Brad Olson, a management analyst from the Public Works Department, also John Bacher, who is our city attorney, and Ed Espinoza, who's a managing principal from Francisco and Associates, a consulting group that's helping us with this process. So I'd like to start with the goals for this evening. So to set the stage, we're going to spend about 20 minutes or so on a presentation. And during that presentation, we're going to provide some background on the city's street lighting districts and the challenges that we're currently facing. We're also going to review information about the new city street lighting district that the city is proposing. And then we're hoping to spend about 30 minutes answering any questions that you might have. So with those meeting goals in mind, I'd like to take a step back and talk about why the city is bringing this proposal forward in the first place. The City of Dublin is committed to fostering an appealing and safe environment through excellent lighting amenities in our neighborhoods and throughout our city. In order to continue providing that reliable streetlight service, while keeping the program financially sustainable and assessment rates proportional, the city is moving forward with a Proposition 218 process where we are proposing to consolidate two existing street lighting districts into one district. So that new district would fund the operations and the maintenance of streetlights throughout Dublin, excluding Camp Parks and excluding the properties in the Boulevard neighborhood. By combining these districts into one, the city will be able to use a single updated assessment methodology that reflects current best practices, and it provides a more consistent approach citywide. This is also going to support the long-term financial health of the program and help maintain the safe, well-lit neighborhoods and streets that contribute to Dublin's quality of life and to property values. With that introduction, I'd like to turn things over to our public works analyst, Brad Olson, to continue the presentation, and he's going to go into more depth onto all of those items I just mentioned. Brad?
All right, thank you, Debbie. As mentioned in the introduction, we are here tonight to discuss lighting districts. But what are those? Lighting districts are a type of assessment district established under state law to fund specific services, in this case, public street lighting. Dublin currently has 2 street light maintenance districts, which we short term SLMDs, and 1 community facilities district, or CFD, that funds street lighting. Property owners pay street lighting assessment charges annually on their property tax bills, and those funds go to these districts. For the districts that do lighting, the biggest cost driver over the years has been energy, the power needed to light the lights. There have been 2 energy efficiency efforts done to date. Currently, over 90% of the lights in Dublin have been converted to LEDs. This has led to significant savings, but the energy costs have been rising quickly over the same time period. Next slide, please. So to put lighting districts in more of a picture form, here is a map of the city's existing districts that manage street lighting. In the lightish yellow color on the picture, we have SLMD 1983-1, which is the oldest district. It was created when the city was incorporated. And then in pink across the map, we have the newer lighting district, SLMD 1999-1, which was formed with the East Dublin expansion in the late 90s. The third district here that's highlighted in blue is a facilities district, 2017 one. It covers the Boulevard neighborhood, as we just heard, and it is subject to different regulations because it's a facilities district rather than a lighting district. So that in mind, we are not including it at this time in the consolidation effort. We are also not including Camp Parks, the big area in white on the screen, which has lighting that is not managed by the city. Next slide, please. So now we'll dive a little more into detail on the 2 different lighting districts we are looking at, 1983-1 and 1999-1. 1983-1, as the name suggests, was established in 1983. It was created actually by the county and then handed over to the city when the city incorporated. And the lights in this district are primarily non-decorative, which is pictured here on the right. When this district was set up, there was a maximum fee established, but there wasn't any annual escalator to move that cost up with inflation because at that time, legislative bodies could increase the assessment amounts each year without to keep up with costs. So there wasn't really a need for an escalator. When Prop 218 was passed, that changed that ability to do that. So that in mind, the maximum assessment was set in stone and it got hit in 2007. We reached the maximum at almost 20 years ago. In that same time, PG&E costs have increased quite a bit by approximately 3% or 300%. So while the costs have gone up incrementally each year, the assessment revenue stayed the same. So we are losing money. And that shortfall has meant that the district has needed to dip into its reserves every year, which are going to run out soon. When the reserves run out, the general fund will begin needing to subsidize this district using funding dollars that could have been spent elsewhere. Next slide, please. So the newer district, was established in 1999. The lights in this district are primarily decorative, as pictured here. By the late 90s, Prop 218 was in effect, so an annual escalator was built in to 1999-1. So as a result, it is not experiencing the same shortfall as 83-1. That said, over that time period in the last 25 years, maintenance costs have been steadily increasing, and there have also been big changes to best practices that are used for assessment districts. So replacing this district with a citywide district would allow for a uniform assessment methodology and improve our current best practices. Next slide, please. So as mentioned previously, 83-1, the rates have not changed in 20 years, and the efficiency efforts have saved about 50% of the cost when they were put into place, but the rapidly climbing rates have now caught up. That led to an impending funding shortfall that was brought up to council last May, in May 2025. At that time, council provided staff direction to address the shortfall in 1983-1, and this was followed by 3 separate meetings earlier this year. First, to approve the Prop 218 process to start down this path. Next, to initiate the formation of the new lighting district we are proposing. And then to finally, in April, to approve the preliminary engineer's report for that new district, as well as to authorize the mailing of the notices and ballots, which you should have received in your mailboxes. Next slide. So now a little bit on this new lighting district. There's a slightly different acronym here. Instead of street light maintenance district, this is a street lighting assessment district, or SLAD. That is the more commonly used acronym for assessment districts that are focused on street lighting. This SLAD 26-1 would have boundaries that are contiguous with city limits, excluding, as we mentioned before, Camp Parks and the Boulevard neighborhood. This proposed district will also be comprised of 3 different benefit zones. Zone A would fund all the light fixtures, both decorative and non-decorative, that are along major roadways, which we will see a picture of shortly. And zones B and C would fund the street lights that are on local roadways, if there are, whether they're B for non-decorative and C for decorative. Next slide. So for the visual learners out there, here are some images that we put together in the analysis portion for SLAD 26-1. This first map shows the proposed district boundaries. As noted before, it is citywide except for Camp Parks, where we do not have jurisdiction, as well as Boulevard neighborhood that is subject to different regulations. And the next map. This is where we get a little more granular and show the major roadways that would be funded under Zone A. So if you can see on your screen here, running north-south, we have San Ramon Road, Village Parkway, Doherty Road, Hacienda, Tassajara, and Fallon. And then running east-west, there will be Dublin Boulevard, Amador Valley Boulevard, Central Parkway, and Gleason Drive. And now we get the next big question: how would this district be funded? So in combining the districts, the revenue that used to go to the separate districts, 83-1 and 99-1, would now be collected together in SLAD 2026-1. The engineer's report that was prepared for this district estimates that next fiscal year 26-27, the revenue would be approximately $1.25 million. Of that total revenue, approximately 1.14 million would come in from assessments that are on property tax bills, and 87,000 would come from the general fund that would be used to cover public benefit for the major roadways that we just talked about. The revenue that comes in would fund operations and maintenance, but there would also be about $100,000 that would be put into the reserve accounts for unforeseen expenditures and contingencies. This is something we don't have now, or we are running through and almost out of in 1983-1. The existing reserve balances for 99-1 and the little bit that would remain in 83-1 would get allocated into reserve accounts for each zone. So the money would stay in the area where it is now. And then the yearly reserve contributions, that 100,000, would get split by those benefit zones. Next slide, please. So this table helps break down some of the various parts of the proposed assessment that you will see on your ballots. Just as a note, this is only for single-family homes. The assessments for other parcel types of the properties they vary by property type. So we wanted to make sure this was simple and gave a good view for most of the people who would get these in the mail for this explainer. All single-family home assessments would include the major roadway portion. For 26-27, that would be $17. So you can see on the table, everyone has the $17. And then if you live in a single family home on a street with non-decorative lighting, you would have the Zone B portion, which is $18 for a total of 35. If you live on a single family home on a street with decorative lighting, you would have the Zone C charge of $45 for a total of 62 for the year. If you are on a private street with whichever type of lighting and your private HOA funds street lighting, then you would only have the major roadway component, which is 17. And just for comparison, as noted below, the current assessment range is about $19 to $83. So this new range would be 17 to 62. And also, as noted below on this table, all of the properties, in this new assessment would have an annual escalator built in that would raise the maximum assessment, the maximum possible per year. This escalator would only affect what could be charged, but budgets and fund balances would still be reviewed annually to determine what the actual need is. And so if it's less than the maximum, we would only be charging for what we needed in funding. Next slide, please. So a little bit on the balloting process. Notice and ballots were mailed out about 2 weeks ago. You may have received these as early as Friday the 25th in your mailbox. The ballot is this little blue item pictured on the right side here. It would have your parcel number, your property address. It will also say what your existing maximum assessment is and the proposed maximum assessment. And the big dates here are all of those ballots are due by June 16th, which is the night of our public hearing. That is the deadline to hand in ballots and provide public comment on this item. If you are planning to mail your ballot in or even to drop it off at the desk, just make sure it can arrive to the city by close of business on June 16th. If it is 4:30 p.m. and you're trying to rush in, the doors will close and you can still bring your ballot, but you would need to bring it that evening to the council meeting, which would start at 7 p.m. Also importantly, unlike a general election, the postmarked date does not apply here. If you postmark it on the 16th and we get it on the 18th, it will have missed the balloting process. We don't abide by those same rules as the general election. So ballot tabulation will be done on the 17th, and then the results will be declared at our next council meeting, which is on July 21st. Next slide, please. So what does a yes vote do? If a majority of votes that are submitted are in favor of forming this district, SLAD 26-1 will replace 1983-1 and 1999-1. This will reduce the pressure on the general fund. It will free up resources for things like infrastructure, parks, and public safety. A yes vote also provides long-term financial sustainability, aligns the revenues that are coming in for lighting districts with the projected maintenance costs that those districts will experience. And it also provides us with a uniform assessment approach citywide using the current best practices for lighting districts. As for the no side of the equation, if a majority of votes submitted oppose forming this new lighting district, the district will not be formed, and we would default go back to the existing street lighting districts that are in place right now. This will lead to an increased funding shortfall that will be billed to the reserves until those are fully depleted, at which point the money will have to come from the general fund. This will reduce the resources that are available for things like infrastructure, parks, public safety. And so we encourage this new district and what it could help us do for the city. Next slide. As far as outreach, the city has been present at several events throughout the city. You may have seen our table at the St. Patrick's Day event on the 14th and 15th of March. We also have tabled at the farmers market early on in the farmers market season, as well as this evening. Flyers were provided at these events, and they each have links to the city website where there are lots of frequently asked questions and information about the district posted there. The notice that you received with the ballots also includes much of this information that we are reviewing tonight and that is on the city website. And just for reference, this QR code you see on the screen here will take you to that website as well. Next slide. To learn more, before we open things up for Q&A, here are a few different avenues you can take if you do have questions. We have an email and phone number set up for this effort. You can email city staff at Dublin Streetlights, all one word, at dublin.ca.gov. You can also leave staff a voicemail at 925-452-2188. A staff member will respond to your inquiries as soon as possible. We have a website also dedicated to this effort, which is listed here, dublin.ca.gov/lighting 2026. And the QR code pictured here, which is the same on the previous slide, will take you directly to that webpage. We will also have the email, voicemail number, and QR code on the next page as we go through Q&A. Thank you very much.
Awesome. All right, well, we are going to start with a time of Q&A. If you have not had a chance to submit your questions, please do so using the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom bar. If you do not see the Q&A box, click on the More button and you should see an icon for Q&A. You can either drag that down to the bottom of your Zoom window bar or simply open it from that section, but all questions would be submitted through the Q&A box, and then we will read them aloud and go through them. If for some reason your question is worded differently than you submitted it, it's likely because we received duplicate questions, and so we're consolidating those. But we are going through every question received. So I'm going to start with the first question. This is for you, Ed. It says, is there a difference between an assessment and a tax?
Thank you for that question. Good evening, City of Dublin. It's an excellent question. So there are very material differences between an assessment and a tax. A tax provides revenue for general government purposes and public services. In contrast, assessments provide funding for a specific improvement or public service. And also the revenue collected must be accounted for separately from the city's general fund. In addition, assessments by state law must be apportioned based on the special benefits each property receives from the improvements or services funded by the assessment, which is very different than a tax.
Okay.
I think one
Yes.
other important distinction there is that taxes can only be approved or the voters need to approve taxes. That wasn't always historically true. So the city council has no power to enact a tax unless the voters approve it. So the council can put it on the ballot, but it has to be approved by the voters. There's sort of a similar process in the context of assessments, but we have to go through the process we're talking about to adopt an assessment that's levied on property.
Awesome. All right. So the next question is for you, Brad. It says, I own property, but I'm not a citizen. Can I participate?
All right. Thank you very much. That is a great question. Yes, if you own the key in this particular process is you own property. The notices and ballots are sent to the property owners. That's also is a place where it differs from the general election, where citizens are voting. Citizenship does not have an effect for these lighting districts. It is strictly, are you the owner of the property in question? But thank you for that question.
Great. All right. So the next question that we have is also for you, Brad. It says, how will my current lighting assessment be affected each year?
Great question as well. That will depend on the lighting type as well as the funding source for the lighting, whether it's public or private. That's where, as we talked about before, that's where the total bill comes from. And then, as I mentioned also before, there would be this CPI increase that is based on Bay Area Consumer Price Index, what that is for the year. And the way this district would be set up is it would be that percentage. It would go up by that percentage or 3%, whichever is greater. That said, that affects the maximum that could be charged. The assessment rate for the next year and the year after would be items that council approves during the annual process of bringing forward the engineer's reports and the proposed assessments.
Okay, great. So the next question that we have is going to be for you again, Brad, and I think we actually may be able to show an answer to this possibly. But the question says, is there a public map to determine whether my property is served by primarily decorative or non-decorative street lighting? If not, what is the best way for a homeowner to confirm which category applies to the street light near their home?
Perfect. On our website, on our city website that's listed here and accessible by that QR code, we have an interactive map. There's a picture, you'll see a picture of the city of Dublin. And if you click on that picture, it will take you to this GIS map. From there, you can zoom in and find your property. And when you find the area and you click on it, a window will pop up with the generalized fees for that area of the map. So it is not address specific, but it will have what your fee would be because you are in that area on the map.
Okay, great. The next question is for Ed. It says, how are voting results determined?
Thank you, Dana. Great question. So as mentioned during the presentation this evening, notices and ballots were mailed to all property owners in the city to the mailing address on record with the county assessor. The results are based on the return ballots, and the ballots are weighted by each property's proposed assessment. And what that means is 1 vote per dollar. And if a majority of those weighted ballots returned do not oppose the formation of the district, then City Council may proceed with approval to form it.
Okay. The next question is another one for you, Ed. If the new assessment is approved, when would it take effect?
The new assessments would take effect for upcoming fiscal year 26-27. And tangibly what that means is property owners will see the new assessments on the upcoming property tax bill with the first installment due in November of 2026. Also, the city will begin making its required annual contribution in upcoming fiscal year 26-27. So both the property owners and the city will kick in will contribute their share of the funding for this upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, the next question I believe is going to be potentially for you, John, or Brad. It says, why does the city have a mandatory increase of 3% or the COLA, whichever is greater? What if the costs are reduced or the reserve is met? Do we get a refund? Do the other districts have this condition, and are they collecting more money than we need?
So currently, the oldest district in town, 1983-1, doesn't have this escalator. It's been capped for the last 20 or so years at $19. The newer district in town does have, it's an even more complicated assessment methodology that combines not only CPI, but also energy specific costs and a bunch of other things. So for the last handful of years at least, the maximum assessment has gone up by that amount. So what could be billed, but that is not what is actually billed. Council has determined each year to either not raise the amount or raise it by less than the potential that it goes up. And the same would apply here to your question. So if CPI was 10%, that would raise the maximum by 10%, but council and staff, we would look at what our actuals are forecasted to be and use that. So it may still only go up by a couple percent, where this would not be designed to profit in any way. It's really just covering costs.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we answered the secondary question about the CPI being 10%. Okay, so the next question that I have here is for you, Debbie. If this is approved, would the city be paying a portion of the street lighting budget?
If this new singular street lighting district is approved, then yes, the city will be paying assessments both for city-owned properties as well as the city will be paying the portion of the budget corresponding to the general benefit to the public at large. So yes.
Okay, and another question for you, Debbie. What happens if this doesn't pass and the city has to pay for the funding shortfall?
All right. Well, Brad mentioned this earlier in his presentation. The increased funding shortfall will be billed to reserves until those are depleted, at which point the funding will come from the general fund. So for instance, in fiscal year 27-28, funding will need to come from the general fund. And general fund dollars that would be used for lighting will no longer be available for things like city infrastructure, parks, or public safety. So it will take the focus away from those areas if we have to use some of these general fund dollars to pay for lighting.
Okay, so going back to a previous question, there's a portion of the question that wasn't fully addressed, and the question is, what happens if the costs decrease or the reserve goal is met? Would residents receive a refund? And do the other districts include a similar condition? Are they collecting more funding than is needed? So I think the main question is, would residents receive a refund if the reserve goal is met?
Maybe I can address that question. So, landscape and lighting assessment districts by design are established for public agencies to only collect the funding that they need to fulfill the budget for the ensuing fiscal year. And the reason that is because by law, the city must approve through a multi-step process every year. And as part of that process, what is evaluated is the budget that is required uh, to maintain some operations and any associated repairs, and also for future capital improvement projects. Asked owners through this process wide SLAD is to approve the maximum assessment. The city maximum, but assess for approval. As to the question, are other districts in the city subject to the same requirements and the same CPI? There are some other assessment districts in the city that are subject to a CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and those districts, it's the same concept. The reason the CPI is authorized is to keep up with inflationary increases in maintenance and utilities and things that impact the budget. But under no scenario is the city collecting more than is needed, and you know, there's an annual process that occurs every year to determine what the need is and what should be levied every fiscal year.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next question is, given that if this assessment is opposed, the city would need to rely on the general fund dollars. What is the estimated general fund budget, and is it currently projected to have a surplus or a deficit without the additional burden? And I'm not sure if that would go to John, Brad.
I don't know if we have exact numbers on the overall general fund budget. Um, I think the key concern here is, and I might have mentioned this briefly or in passing in the presentation, we would like to have the funds that come in for lighting to be able to cover the costs of lighting. And this serves that purpose, is to make the realistic costs kind of equal with what we have budgeted. And as was noted as well, it takes money that the general fund has for operating money in that we can use for parks, that we can use for trails, that we can use for somewhat discretionary things. It takes that money away if we have to use it on something like making sure the streets are lit. And John, if I missed anything.
No, I think you got that right.
Okay, so the next question is, so if SLAD 2026-1 gets approved, will property owners in SLMD 1983 and 19, in SLMD 1983, I'm so sorry. Um, if this gets approved, will property owners in SLMD 1983 see an increase and property owners in 1999 see a decrease in their property tax?
So to address that question, I think it's important to note that what's being voted on is the maximum assessment for all properties within the city. So from that lens, 1980 property owners currently within 1983-1 will see an increase in their assessment, and property owners that are fronting streets with decorative lighting or currently within 99-1 will see a decrease in their maximum assessment. So if a property owner that is adjacent to decorative streets with decorative lighting, if they look on their ballot, they'll actually see a reduction in the maximum. With that said, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, what is currently being assessed on properties within the decorative lighting areas is below the maximum. And so on property tax bills, I believe it's $47 or $48 currently. On property tax bills for this upcoming fiscal year, should the new SLAD be approved, property owners in decorative lighting areas will see the assessment go from 48 to 62. So, but the maximum is going down for property owners in these decorative lighting areas.
Okay. The next question that we have says, the fee collected by the county says 1.7%, yet the data included shows something greater. Not so much a question, but a statement, but if someone would like to respond to that or clarify, ask a
I
clarifying
think
question.
what they might be referring to is the fee that is like general property tax dollars. That is a percentage. This is, rather than a percent, it is like a percentage of the value of your home. This is a fixed uh, item on your property tax bill. So for 83-1, it would be a $35 charge in a list of items in addition to your just general property tax. Then there would be these other separate items, including this assessment district number. So there wouldn't be a percentage involved.
Okay, so the next question is, has the City of Dublin ever charged less than the maximum in any other assessment district?
Yes, it has. For that, there's landscape maintenance districts that provide funding for the maintenance of landscape improvements, and there are certain districts in certain years where the assessment has been lower than the maximum.
Okay. The next question is for you, Ed. Why do some neighborhoods pay more than others?
Sure, that's a great question. So some neighborhoods are proposed to pay more than others. It primarily comes down to the decorative lighting neighborhoods as compared to the non-decorative street lighting neighborhoods. Because decorative lighting provides additional aesthetic and lighting benefits as compared to non-decorative lighting, the neighborhoods with decorative lighting are proposed to pay a higher assessment.
Great. Okay, the next question is why hasn't the city been increasing this over time? Why is this happening now rather than in years prior? And that is for you, Ed.
So the reason assessments in certain parts of the city haven't increased in years prior has a lot to do with the fact that a good more than half of the city, there's no annual escalator authorized. So all the areas within the non-decorative neighborhoods, the city hasn't been able to increase the assessment because it's not authorized. And as was mentioned in the presentation, the assessment has been flat since 2007. Reserves, the city has had reserves on hand to offset a lot of the inflationary increases in electricity costs and maintenance, but it's gotten to the point recently that the fund balance can no longer support the increasing utilities and maintenance costs. And for that reason, the city will need to generate additional assessment revenue to avoid having the general fund step in and offset these deficits, and also avoid taking away general fund dollars from other essential services such as public safety.
The next question we have is for you, Ed. What is the reasoning behind the one vote for each $1 of proposed assessment system?
It's an excellent question. The reasoning is really state law. So as the city attorney mentioned earlier, there's one of the primary distinctions between assessments and taxes is that assessments must be approved by property owners versus registered voters. And assessments are governed by Proposition 218, which states that what determines the results of a balloting process like the one we're undertaking this year is that the ballots returned must be weighted by the proposed assessment for each property, which essentially means one vote per dollar. And as an example, if a commercial property is proposed to pay $100, but and a residential property is proposed to pay $50, the return ballot for the commercial property would be weighted 2-to-1 as compared to the residential property. So it's state law. It's not the City of Dublin choice. It's all across the state. That's how assessments are approved.
Okay, the next question is for you, Brad. Does this mean that all property owners will be upgraded to decorative streetlights?
Thank you for that question. That came in at one of the farmers markets as well. No, this process is really, and this new district is really designed to fund the maintenance and operating costs of our existing light system, and to provide reserve money for projects like replacements when those are needed. That said, there are some areas that in a CIP project, some major roadways might get switched from decorative or from non-decorative to decorative, but this is not an effort to make everything decorative. It is maintaining what we have now and keeping it funded.
Great. Okay, the next question is, I believe for you, Brad. If this passes, what are the city's plans for reporting on costs, improvements, and related updates? And how often would those reports be provided?
So all of the numbers get approved as part of the budget. So they go through our biannual budget cycle every other year. Our 2-year budget is documented. It includes money for the street lighting districts. In addition to that, the annual engineers reports that go through the council meetings for approval include those numbers and the balances that are in each account.
Okay, great. That is all of our questions. Unless we have any more questions coming in over the next few minutes, we'll give it a couple minutes to see if any more questions come in. Okay, it looks like we do have some questions coming in here in just a sec. Give us just a second to get to those. So I believe one of these questions is a duplicate question that's already been answered, and it's regarding has the City of Dublin ever charged less than the maximum in any other lighting district? And I believe we answered the question to that as yes. Correct? Okay, so we can
Correct.
move forward from that one. Do surrounding cities have a similar process?
They do. They do. As I mentioned earlier, this process is statewide. It's statewide law, and so any public agency that is looking to establish a new assessment or increase an existing assessment must undertake this process, mailing notices and ballots to all property owners, and the results determined by the weighted ballots.
Okay. The next question says the classification appears to group condos and townhomes together without accounting for differences in housing density. Should condos in 6 to 7-story buildings be assessed differently than condos or townhomes in 2 to 3-story buildings?
So
You can go ahead and take that one.
sure. Yeah. So condos and townhomes are assessed in a similar way, meaning about 75% of that as compared to a detached single-family home product. Well, with that said, we evaluate what the assessment should be for certain neighborhoods on a case-by-case basis. If for some reason the county use code, what the county has assigned on the development seems to appear like it should be treated as a single family home or a condominium. So townhomes is kind of that interim product. But generally speaking, if it's an attached townhome, it will be treated similar for the purposes of the assessment as a condominium.
Okay, so the next question is surrounding Table 2, seeking clarification around Table 2. It says this appears to be a fee collected by the county for administering the assessment. In Table 2, the cost estimate table, Street Lighting Maintenance District number 1983-1 shows 314,670 collected, but only 6,556 listed as revenue yet to be spent. Can you clarify what these figures represent?
Sure. So if it's table 2 in the proposed engineer's report, the county collection fee is 1.7% of revenue placed on the roll. So that can vary from year to year depending on the assessments that are placed on the roll. In terms of reserve collection and the amount of revenue that exceeds the annual budget, it's split into two categories. There's operating reserves and there's capital reserves. Operating reserves are held for cash flow purposes because of the timing of when the city receives its revenue from the county. The county receives the revenue in two installments following when property tax bills are due every year. So generally speaking, it's the city will receive the revenue in January and May. And so for that reason, the city will need about 6 months of operating reserves for cash flow purposes to fund expenses for half of the year. In addition, there are reserves that are needed to fund future capital improvement projects or replacement of existing street lighting or existing lamps and things like that. And so as part of the budgeting process, that is also forecasted and the appropriate reserve collection is determined. So that's what is shown on the budget table. There's the county collection fee, which is not a city fee. It's what the county charges. And then there's the O&M, the annual routine expenses, and the reserves that are shown there are broken down in those two categories: the operating reserves for cash flow and the capital for future improvement and replacement projects.
So it looks like we have a follow-up question to that question that says, so are they one pot or three pots or the same money?
So it's one fund, if that's the question. One city fund, I believe, but that the funding is evaluated in those three components. But the revenue is collected and held in one fund per district, right? So we don't commingle. The city doesn't commingle funds for different districts. Each district has its own fund, and it's looked at and evaluated with those three components: the operations and maintenance, operating reserves, and capital reserves.
Okay. Well, it looks like that is all of our questions for the evening. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Debbie.
All right, thank you. That was a great series of questions tonight. My many thanks to all of you who joined us from the community and participated and took the time to ask some great questions and to learn about this process. We're going to follow up and post this presentation, this entire recording on our website, so you can share it with others, or you can refer back to it in the future if you want to go through some of this information again. And I just want to say goodbye. And again, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good night, everyone.